certified, licensed and insured, and farm ready. Powell Gene, Gene at yahoo.com. 352-629-2440. Gene Powell Pasture 352-629-2440. Gene is a proud United States veteran.
The college broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios. This is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
All right, 6 minutes after 9 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. There are so many adjectives associated with the holiday season, and most of them are, I think you would consider them positive adjectives, right? Joyful, yes. Happy and festive and things like that. But what about stressful? Is it stressful? And are there reasons for it to be stressful? Did you lose somebody at this time of year, like years ago, and does it still resonate with you and still cause you stress or sadness? We watched a movie yesterday that there was a young man who didn't want to go home at Christmas time because it was during Christmas that his father died, and I know it was just a movie, but I think it probably represents the way we really are. Mm-hmm. So let's talk to Dr. Elizabeth Stanley. She has studied the way we react to things that have been traumatic in the past, and maybe things that we even perceive as being potentially traumatic. Dr. Stanley is a United States Army veteran. She's an associate professor of security studies at Georgetown University, and her book, again, is called Widen the Window: Training Your Brain and Body to Thrive During Stress and Recover from Trauma. Dr. Stanley, good morning, and it's an honor to have you on the show, and thank you for your service.
Good morning, Larry and Robin. It is such a pleasure to be here, and please call me Liz.
Liz, okay. Well, thank you for allowing me to do that. Where are you, Liz? Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from the Washington, D.C. area.
When I was talking about the things that might be stressful, specifically around the holidays, that's almost like I don't know if it's lighter than some of the stress you talk about in the book, but is there such a thing as a lighter stress than others?
It's really interesting that you phrased the question that way, Larry, because for many of us, we have developed a pattern to compare what's going on in our own life with what's going on in other people's lives. And one of the most common things I see when I'm teaching about resilience in a range of settings is people make these comparisons. Well, I didn't have a rape. I wasn't in combat. I'm only dealing with holiday stress, or I'm only dealing with traffic and bills. And when we do that to ourselves, we're actually overriding and devaluing the part of our brain that is responsible for turning stress on. And that makes our stress worse. And so, when we make these comparisons, like about holiday stress, that's not a big deal. I can't believe I'm making a big deal out of I haven't found the best present for somebody or something like that. It actually can make our stress worse.
Oh, wow. I don't know that any of us would have ever thought that. So is there a conclusion to that? I hate to jump to the end of the book, but are we...
Yes.
Is there advice?
Yes, there absolutely is advice. The biggest misunderstanding around stress and trauma that we have in our society is that we can resolve our stress through willpower or self-discipline or positive thinking or that kind of comparing that we do. Oh, well, I don't have it as bad as they do, so I should be fine. And when we do that and we override, that's in our what I call the thinking brain, our thinking brain, which has all of the thoughts and the way that we make decisions consciously. But that's not the part of the brain that controls stress. The part of the brain that controls stress I call the survival brain. And it's nonverbal. We don't see what the survival brain is thinking in our thoughts. We see it in our stress arousal in our body sensations, and in our emotions. And what's most important is that it's the survival brain that controls whether we're going to recover from stress or trauma or not. And the survival brain will only do that when it's feeling safe. So let me give you an example of this. A really mundane example. Sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic, you're late for a meeting,
right,
and someone's just cut you off, you're feeling really impatient, you might be feeling anxious about the meeting, And you have kind of a choice in that moment. You can direct your attention to worrying about, being late and being angry at the guy who just cut you off. And when you do that, your survival brain is going to make you even more stressed. You might notice that your stomach will clench, and you might feel, anger, and you might feel heat, and, your pulse might increase. Or you can make the choice to direct your attention somewhere else. Where we direct our attention has these ripple effects into our survival brain and body. So you can direct your attention instead to feeling your hands touching the steering wheel, or to listening to something really funny or pleasant music on the radio, or looking up in the sky and just looking at the vastness of the sky. Directing your attention to one of those things is going to be much more neutral and help the survival brain begin to recover some, so that instead of fueling the stress and making it worse, you're diffusing the stress arousal and helping set your body up to do some recovery. There's a lot more about how to help the survival brain feel safe in the last third of the book.
And with yourself as a United States Army veteran, you also feel that this book is going to help other veterans, because that has got to, and law enforcement as well, because that has got to be one of the most stressful situations anyone can be in.
Absolutely. This book grew from my own experience with stress and trauma. Many of us came from a traumatic childhood and served in the military, had a near-death experience while I was deployed in Bosnia, eventually developed PTSD and a range of different physical illnesses because I was coping with stress the way many of us do, by kind of pushing it under and denying it. And so I developed this resilience training program called Mindfulness-Based Mind Fitness Training. And we tested it. I collaborated with neuroscientists and stress researchers on 4 different studies with active duty troops before they were deploying to combat. And we found that 8 weeks of this training, really learning to direct your attention in ways to help the survival brain feel safe, to help the body recover, to widen our window for stress arousal, that 8 weeks of training, daily practice, 10 to 15 minutes a day of directing attention, can lead to real changes in the way that the brain is wired, in the way that the body performs during stress, and the way that it recovers afterward. So I know this works in those extreme stress situations.
Wow.
Our scientific research shows it, and it also works in a range of other settings. I've taught in a whole wide range of settings, and people have found it to be very helpful.
So I watched a video on how to fix the broken edge of my dresser, and the guy in the video made it look really easy and very quick. And when I actually went and got the stuff and tried to fix it, it was hard and stupid. I mean, and I got stressed out. So it sounds like what you're saying. Is it like watching that video? Is it easier said than done? Is it hard to implement what you're saying to do?
That's a great question, Larry. The exercises are really easy in concept. They can be challenging while you're doing them, because we have to remember we've spent decades wiring whatever habits we have right now for how we deal with stress or negative emotions or trauma. And you can't just undo wiring immediately with like an instant fix. It's not a pill. And, a lot of people in our society really like the pill form of something as, a quick fix. But there aren't quick fixes with our neurobiology. Every moment we're having a choice, and whatever we're doing in a repeated way is having big effects on our brain, on our body, on our genes, whether we've turned our gene expression on or off. All of these things happen from repeated experiences. So it's not hard to know what to do. The biggest thing is having the commitment to doing it on a regular basis. Just like you have to have a big commitment to do physical exercise on a regular basis. And physical exercise helps to widen the window too. Mm-hmm. It's the same way with mind fitness exercises. But they're not long, and they're not hard. Anybody could download the first exercise in the MFit sequence from my website, and it's 5 minutes long. It's an exercise to help train your attention to one place that helps the survival brain feel safe, which is going to sound really strange, but the contact between the back of your legs and your butt and the back with the chair, that solid groundedness, when we direct our attention to that weighted heaviness there, that helps our survival brain feel safe and turn stress off.
Wow. I sit on the edge of my chair. I guess I'm going to have to push my tush to the back now.
Yes, and we can do that anywhere. Once you start using it on a regular basis, it can be a wonderful way to transition between different activities. You can do it when you're in the middle of an argument with someone. You can feel instead of the back of you might be sitting, but if you're standing up, you feel the bottoms of your feet with the floor. Mm-hmm. You can do it when you're falling asleep, or if you have sleep problems, it's great to help fall asleep. You're lying in the bed, feeling the whole back of your body with the bed. So anybody can download that from my website, which is elizabeth-stanley.com.
Oh, perfect. I was just going to ask that. Elizabeth-stanley.com. I wanted to go back to something you said earlier. You said you had a near-death experience?
Yes, I did. I was part of the American force that was part of the first NATO force after the Dayton Peace Treaty was signed when we went into Bosnia. And I had commanded a convoy for 4 days. We got caught in really icy roads. Some of our vehicles jackknifed and fell over, and we had to get a big crane. We're sitting in 2 feet of snow. I had pneumonia, but I didn't know it. And I'm in charge of these 100 vehicles and 200 soldiers to keep them safe while we're sitting there waiting for this crane. We finally got into Bosnia, and we were moving into a town that had been changed hands during the war, and so we were going to be building our base camp in this bombed-out bus depot. And there was snow everywhere, so we wanted to clear one of the buildings and find some concrete to put our tents up on. And while I was working with my soldiers to clear these buildings, the concrete dust, between that and the exhaustion, because I hadn't been sleeping, and the pneumonia that I didn't know I had, I stopped breathing, and I had to be medically evacuated to a UN hospital and resuscitated.
Did you have one of those near-death things that you hear about, where they see a bright light or a tunnel or family?
Yes, I did.
Really?
I left the body. I saw it, and then I felt the light, and I walked to it, and I felt very peaceful, and I heard this voice that was just infinitely kind, and it said to me, "You have to go back." And the next moment, now my consciousness is back in my body. I'm on the table, all the doctors in the light above me, and yeah, it was really a very powerful moment.
So
at that time, I had no idea why that was happening, but in some ways, this book and this resilience program that I created are almost a direct link. It was the beginning of moving to this. This is the fruit of having returned to my body.
And I often wonder, when I hear those stories, do the people who've gone through that have less stress because they know it's all going to work out at the end, because you have a glimpse of life after death, and maybe you don't even need a near-death experience. Maybe you just have to have strong faith in your religion, and maybe religion plays a role in how stressed we are. Can you comment on all those things I just said? I don't really have a question. It's just a thing I'm curious about.
I know for myself, I didn't have a chance to really process what had happened there because I was then really sick. I was in the hospital 3 days, and I returned to my unit, and I was back to working 17-hour days again while I was, taking all these drugs for the pneumonia. Right. And I just didn't have a chance to process it then. It took many years for it to really fully settle. But I do think that it did give me a different perspective, and I know that people who have very strong faith, that is one of the ways that we can help our thinking brain feel more comfortable, and that then helps the survival brain feel more comfortable. Whether stress is traumatic or not has everything to do with whether our survival brain perceives us to be helpless, powerless, and lacking control. And so if we have strong faith, we might not feel like we have a lot of control in a certain situation, but we might have a sense that we're not fully helpless, that things are not, that it's, we might be more comfortable with things not being under our control because we realize that there might be something bigger going on here.
Yeah.
You also say in your book that sometimes parents will contribute to their child's depression or anxiety or stress because they're just running them all over the place.
Yes. Resilience is something that we can build, and it's also something we can undermine. And how wide our window initially comes from our childhood. It begins with our early social conditioning. It even starts during the last trimester in the womb. And so if our parents are really stressed, if our parents are coping with unresolved trauma or their own loss or death in their family or something, a really big stressor for them, their window might be narrowed, and then they will help their children wire a narrow window initially. So totally separate from how they're pushing their kids, just the parents' own stress has this tremendous ripple effect onto children. We are wired socially to connect, and so stress contagion and emotion contagion, negative emotion contagion, is strongest in our relationships with our loved ones, our parents, our children, and our romantic partners. And so if parents are stressed, that's going to affect kids. And then if the parents are pushing their kids, that's a whole nother layer on top of it. So, we're seeing really unheard of rates of anxiety and depression and bullying in children today.
Oh, wow.
6 to 8 times higher than they were, say, during World War II and right after. And you'd think World War II was a much more stressful time. In some ways, you might think that, but that's not the case. And I think some of that has to do with this stress and emotion contagion from parents, from teachers.
Interesting.
When we build our own resilience, it's not just our own resilience we're building, we're also then building resilience that we're conveying to everybody around us.
Our guest is Dr. Elizabeth A. Stanley. Her book is called Widen the Window. She already gave her website, so let me repeat it. It's elizabeth-stanley.com. And I wanted to ask you something. Some of the techniques you've been mentioning that are in the book that would help with stress, would they also help with depression or, what was the other thing I was thinking of? Would they help with depression? Oh, gosh. I'm sorry. Because
they absolutely would. We tend to think of these things as all different: depression, anxiety, constant worry, insomnia, chronic pain, weight gain, physical illnesses. We think of these things as all different. They actually share a root cause, and the root cause is the survival brain has become dysregulated, and it's now creating symptoms in a variety of different ways. So, yes, when we help the survival brain complete recovery, it helps with all of these different things. This is getting at the root issue. 2 other things that you can do that get to the root issue: get more sleep, because when we're sleeping, the survival brain is able to do a lot of the recovery it needs to do, and get more cardiovascular exercise. That's a time when our bodies actually expend a lot of the stress arousal that we're carrying around that we don't know of. So between mind fitness exercises, where you're training your attention, sleep, and physical exercise, those 3 together make a tremendous difference.
The other thing I wanted to throw in that I forgot a second ago was lack of self-esteem. Is lack of self-esteem also somehow helped by, refocusing in a different direction?
Yes, I think when we have a lack of self-esteem, there is some old patterning within us that feels helpless and powerless, and this can help with that. I certainly had some of those patterns from my own early, I had a traumatic childhood like many people do, and those unconscious beliefs, they live in our system, and they affect the way that we move through the world. They affect how we respond in stressful situations, and as I heal those things, as I've watched other people heal those things, it changes their responses, and that does help with self-esteem.
Because I would think a child who's been bullied or a woman who's been raped,
yes.
The trauma is there in both cases, but there's also the lack of self-esteem.
Yes.
And I imagine that it always seems like for somebody like myself, knock on wood, I've never gone through something that traumatic, but I do get, bummed out sometimes, and I can watch a video on YouTube of silly dogs, running around, and it'll cheer me up, and it really does the trick. Or if I'm on an airplane, there's a little bit of turbulence, I can watch the Three Stooges on that little TV in front of me, and it's silly, but it takes my mind off of it. I don't know if that's the same thing or not, but... And I'm not in any near degree to somebody who's served in the military and has PTSD. It's not even close.
Well, I think it's all a matter of degree. Stress and trauma are a continuum, and it has everything to do with whether the survival brain is feeling, like I said, helpless, powerless, and lacking control. And sometimes it's really skillful for us to redirect our attention to something that's distracting, especially if we need to be able to function in the short term. I think what's really important to remember, though, is that isn't helping the survival brain do recovery. And so we can, if we are in a short-term situation, it's wonderful. That's not getting at some of those root causes of dysregulation that we were talking about a minute ago.
Well, you talk about one of your times with your dentist.
Yes. So I have had gum graft surgery several times in my life now. The first time I had it was very traumatic. He cut open the roof of my mouth to harvest some graft tissue, and he hadn't shut it closed yet, and he had given me some really strong drugs, and I vomited during the procedure, and it made the roof of my mouth so infected. It was awful. So after that, I needed to do another one, and I kept putting it off. I procrastinated for years, and then I finally found a new dentist who was really amazing. And this time he used donor tissue, so I didn't have to have the roof of my mouth bothered. But while we were in the oral surgery, I'm sitting there. I'm totally calm. I'm paying attention to my contact points on the back of my body, so my survival brain's feeling very rested. And then I had this mental image of the fact that he had sliced open the whole left side of my mouth, and he had detached it to be able to pull it up to sew it against the surgery. As I have that mental image, that of course makes my survival brain freak out, and so I get really stressed, and I'm starting to hyperventilate. I can feel like that tunnel effect of my vision's closing in. I'm about to have that happen. And in that exact moment, before I can kind of mumble, "Can we stop? Can we take a break?" In that exact moment, he touches my shoulder and he says, "Okay, we're going to take a break right now." And he shoved some gauze in and he pushed back.
What?
And I got myself settled. It was amazing. Wow. So when I got myself settled, I did a round of another exercise from MFIT called Ground and Release. It's also in the book. And then I looked to him and I was like, "How did you know that?" And he was like, "Well, I was starting to feel a little faint and dizzy. I knew you needed a break." And I use that story in the book because that is one of the ways that this stress and emotion contagion works. There's a whole variety of neurobiological mechanisms, and I explain them in brief in the book, that explain why we do that. We resonate with people around us, and that's why you can be really in an okay place, but then you walk into a crowded subway station, or you're sitting in bad traffic, or you are walking into a test, you're feeling calm, but everyone else around you is anxious. If you're not careful, you're beginning to pick up their stress arousal and their negative emotions. So becoming aware of that, and then knowing that that's likely to happen and how to direct your attention in ways so you don't pick that up. There's a chapter in the book that talks about that.
Wow, the book is getting really good reviews on Amazon, by the way. It's available as a Kindle, an audiobook, a hardcover, and a paperback, and I was sent a hardcover version. So if I have a listener who would like the book, call me. I guess you could call after we're done with this, because she's on the same line as you'll need to call. So call me in about a minute, 622-9622, and what I'll do is I will just take the first caller and let you have the book. The rest of us have to go buy it. I found my audio version on I like audiobooks. That's why I do radio. On Amazon.
I read the audiobook, so you'll get to hear me.
I saw that. I saw your name on there. Okay, so Elizabeth-Stanley.com is the website for Dr. Stanley. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Doctor, and have a great Christmas.
Thank you so much, Larry and Robin. It was a pleasure chatting, and I hope you both have a great Christmas too.
Thank you. All right, we'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala.
Fox News, I'm Steve Rappaport. Senate leaders sparring over whether to include witnesses in President Trump's impeachment.